Janet stood in front of the mirror, tugging at the waistband of her favorite cotton pants. They used to sit loose, comfortable. Now they pressed against her skin in a way that made her feel like a stranger in her own body. She wasn't eating more, quite the opposite. Dinner had become lighter, smaller. Breakfast? Just tea. And still, her belly kept growing, soft and stubborn. She wasn't just frustrated, she was confused. At 67, Janet had expected some changes. Slower mornings, thinner hair, the occasional forgetfulness, but the steady expansion of her waistline felt unfair. She wasn't indulging in desserts, didn't drink alcohol, and never ate past 7 p.m. So why did she feel heavier every week? Why did her reflection seem less like a woman and more like a warning sign? It wasn't just vanity. It was the silent fear that something deeper was happening. Her daughter had gently hinted at health checks. Her grandson, once eager to cuddle, now sat farther away on the couch. She wondered if they noticed the change as much as she did, or if they were just too kind to say it out loud. And the worst part? Every online solution seemed made for someone else. Juice cleanses, boot camps, fasting schedules. The advice felt harsh, youthful, and completely detached from her world. She didn't want to punish her body, she wanted to understand it. She started asking questions, quiet ones mostly to herself, in the still moments before bed. Is this just aging? Is it too late to feel light again? But one night, those questions turned outward. In a small local forum for women over 60, she shared her story. To her surprise, she wasn't alone. Dozens of replies came in, all echoing the same pain. I eat less, move more, and still, this belly won't leave me. What they all had in common wasn't laziness or lack of willpower. It was misunderstanding. They'd spent years blaming food and effort, never suspecting that their bodies had quietly changed the rules. The metabolism of a 30-year-old doesn't follow the same rhythm at 60. And the biggest shift? It was happening when no one was looking, while they slept. That night, Janet sat up in bed, heart racing, not from fear, but realization. Maybe the answer wasn't in what she did during the day. Maybe the most important part of her weight wasn't built during meals or workouts, but in the hours when her eyes were closed and her guard was down. And if that was true, then maybe, just maybe, she could stop fighting her belly during the day and start supporting it at night. There's something that happens quietly, invisibly, once you cross a certain age. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't even feel dramatic. But over time, it changes everything about how your body responds to rest and to fat. This is the switch Janet never knew existed, the one her doctor never mentioned, the one that had been turned off in her body for years. This switch is a simple rhythm your body used to follow naturally. Burn while you sleep, heal while you rest, release what it doesn't need. For decades, it worked silently in the background, regulating hormones, balancing fat, and resetting your metabolism overnight. But after 60, something shifts. The body doesn't stop working. It just changes the way it prioritizes energy. Instead of focusing on fat burning during sleep, your system starts prioritizing survival. And survival, to a body over 60, often means holding on. To water, to sugar, to fat, especially around the belly. It's a primitive response. The body interprets changes in hormones, lower muscle mass, and even emotional stress as signs that it should protect itself. So instead of releasing excess, it stores it, just in case. That's why people like Janet can eat less and still gain weight. Why sleep starts feeling less restful. Why the scale no longer reflects the effort. Because the internal thermostat that used to tell the body, you're safe, you can let go, no longer fires the same way at night. And unless it's gently encouraged, that switch stays off. But here's where things get interesting. This shift isn't permanent. It's not damage, it's adaptation. And adaptation can be redirected. When Janet learned this, she felt two things at once: frustration, for all the time lost in self-blame, and hope, because this meant there was something she could do. Not drastic, not exhausting, but deeply effective. She began to understand that the night wasn't just for sleep, it was her body's secret workshop. And like any workshop, it needed the right tools. Her body wasn't failing her. It was simply waiting for a new kind of signal, one that told it, you can let go now. You're supported. You're safe. So instead of focusing on what she ate for dinner, Janet began paying attention to how she closed her day, how she treated her body before bed. She didn't need to move more or eat less. She needed to speak her body's new language, a language of calm, a language of balance, and, surprisingly, a language that could be spoken through one small habit applied right before sleep. The first time Janet tried it, she felt almost silly. It was just a soft cream with a faint herbal scent, something she'd read about from another woman on that same forum. No dramatic promises, no fancy packaging, just a simple, natural blend meant to be massaged into the lower belly before bed. She didn't expect much. After all, she'd tried things before. Teas, vitamins, waist wraps, even sleeping with an extra pillow under her knees because someone online said it activated the core. None of it made a difference. So this little balm felt harmless at best. At worst, just another thing to cross off the list. But this time, something was different. Not overnight, not even in the first week, but slowly, her body began to feel less tight, less puffy in the morning, less discomfort when she bent forward to tie her shoes. It wasn't that she looked dramatically different right away, it was that she felt different, lighter, not in weight but in tension. Janet didn't know the science at first. She only knew the feeling. But later, she'd learned something fascinating. Applying natural ingredients to specific parts of the body, especially before sleep, can trigger local circulation, calm inflammation, and, most importantly, lower cortisol levels. That stress hormone that quietly encourages belly fat to linger? It responds better to physical touch and warmth than it does to willpower or discipline. And by applying this balm, Janet was doing more than moisturizing her skin. She was activating signals. She was telling her nervous system, it's time to relax. She was helping her digestive system slow down without crashing. She was easing the silent inflammation that builds up over years of stress, effort, and unmet expectations. For the first time in a long time, her body wasn't being pushed. It was being invited to let go. Weeks passed, and her sleep got deeper. Her cravings during the day grew quieter. She didn't need to fight hunger anymore. It just felt more balanced. And the belly, it softened. Not melted away instantly, but gently shrank as if it no longer needed to protect her. What startled her most wasn't the physical change. It was the emotional one. Janet felt like she'd stepped out of a battle she didn't even realize she'd been fighting. And all it took was a few minutes of calm, applied directly to the place she had once blamed. Have you ever tried anything before bed that helped your weight? Tell me in the comments what worked or didn't. Sometimes the smallest routines are the ones that unlock the biggest changes. Janet used to think of her belly as just a problem to be solved, a lump of fat that meant she'd eaten too much or moved too little. But as the nights passed and her new routine settled in, she began to feel something deeper, something no scale could measure. Her belly wasn't just heavy, it was holding on to something more than calories. It's a quiet truth that many older adults never hear. Belly fat, especially after 60, often isn't about food. It's about what the body has lived through. Years of stress, grief, change, and worry, all of it leaves traces. And for women especially, those traces often settle right in the abdomen. Not because they're weak, but because the body remembers. Science backs this up. Cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, is a major driver of abdominal fat. And cortisol doesn't just come from dramatic events. It rises from subtle daily tensions, worrying about your health, missing a loved one, adjusting to retirement, managing pain. Over time, it tells the body, store energy. We might need it later. That message gets imprinted deep into the belly. But it's not just chemical. It's emotional. Janet realized that every time she looked at her belly with shame, she added another layer of tension to it. Another signal that said, This part of me is a problem, and the body listens. The more we disconnect from a part of ourselves, the harder it becomes for that part to heal. That's why her nightly ritual began to feel sacred, not because it was magical, but because it was the first time she touched her belly with care, not criticism. She wasn't trying to fix it. She was finally acknowledging it, and that changed everything. Her digestion improved, not because she changed her meals, but because her gut, deeply tied to the nervous system, was no longer bracing itself every night. Her posture shifted subtly. Her breath deepened. She wasn't shrinking herself in frustration. She was expanding into trust. Because when the body feels safe, it lets go. This is something no diet book teaches. That healing isn't always about discipline. Sometimes it's about reconnection. Janet's belly hadn't betrayed her. It had been protecting her, carrying years of strain without complaint. And now, with a few minutes of touch, warmth, and stillness each night, she was telling it, "You can rest now. I see you." And slowly, the inflammation faded. The tightness softened. Her belly began to change, not because she forced it, but because she finally made peace with it. For most of her adult life, Janet believed the same thing many of us were taught. If the scale goes up, you eat less. If your belly grows, cut your portions. Calories in, calories out. Simple, right? Except it stopped working. She reduced her breakfast to a banana. Lunch became a small salad with barely any dressing. Dinner? Soup, maybe. Some nights, just tea and toast. She was eating less than she had in her 30s, but her belly only got firmer, rounder, and more uncomfortable. Something wasn't adding up. What she didn't realize, and what so few people talk about, is that eating less after 60 can actually backfire. When the body senses restriction, especially an aging body, it shifts into defense mode. It starts storing, not shedding. This is a biological response, not a failure of willpower. As we age, muscle mass declines, hormones shift, and metabolism slows. When the body doesn't receive enough nourishment, it doesn't interpret that as discipline. It sees it as a threat, a famine, and it responds by slowing down the burn, clinging to fat, and locking energy away, especially in the belly. Janet's light dinners weren't helping her lose weight. They were telling her body, prepare for scarcity, and her body listened, storing every bit of energy it could right around her waist. But the truth was even more subtle. By eating too little, especially in the evening, she was also disrupting her sleep. Her blood sugar dipped too low. Her nervous system stayed on alert. She would wake up tense, hungry, sometimes drenched in sweat. Not because she had done something wrong, but because her body felt unprotected. When she began her new bedtime routine, she didn't just apply the balm. She also allowed herself a small, calming snack in the evening, a warm herbal tea with a spoon of almond butter or a few slices of avocado. Something gentle, something grounding. This wasn't about indulgence. It was about reassurance. It told her body, there's enough. You're not in danger. You can rest. And that was the turning point. Her sleep deepened. Her cravings during the day lessened. She no longer swung between hunger and guilt. She had steadiness. And with that, her belly began to release. Janet learned the hard way that eating less isn't always more. Sometimes it's an act of punishment disguised as discipline. And for an aging body, what it needs most isn't restriction. It's consistency, care, and nourishment that whispers, you're safe now. You can let go. Janet couldn't pinpoint the exact night it happened. It wasn't marked by a number on the scale or a comment from someone else. It was quieter than that. She just woke up one morning and realized. Her body no longer felt like the enemy. For decades, she had approached her health like a battle, fighting cravings, battling her belly, waging war on weight. Each meal was a negotiation. Each mirror glance, a judgment. The nighttime had been no different. She went to bed tense, bracing for another restless night and another disappointing morning. But now, her evenings looked different. There was a calm to them, a rhythm. She would gently massage the balm onto her abdomen, breathe deeply, maybe sip her tea while listening to soft music. It wasn't a ceremony. It was just kindness. And that kindness was something she had denied herself for years, always believing that results required punishment, not peace. It's strange how quickly the body responds when it finally feels heard. The first change was sleep, not just more hours but better ones. Deep, uninterrupted rest that left her refreshed instead of foggy. Then came the mornings, less bloating, fewer aches, more steadiness in her step. She didn't jump out of bed, but she no longer dreaded the day, and her belly, the old source of shame, began to feel different under her hands, less rigid, less inflamed. She no longer avoided mirrors. She didn't weigh herself every morning like before. The mirror and the scale had stopped being her scorekeepers. They were now just tools, not punishers. What mattered more was how she felt inside her skin, and for the first time in years, that skin felt like home. Janet had stopped trying to control her body and started listening to it, and what she heard surprised her. "I was never working against you. I was just waiting for you to stop pushing me away." That night before bed ritual, once done out of desperation, had become an act of trust. And in that trust, Janet found something weight loss alone could never give her. Relief. Relief from years of trying so hard. From advice that never fit. From a story that told her change had to be hard to be real. But this was different. This was soft, slow, and deeply personal. Her body wasn't a problem anymore. It was a partner. And every night, with gentle hands and a quiet heart, she told it, "We're in this together now." Janet hadn't planned to mention it at her annual checkup. She figured it wasn't worth bringing up. After all, what would a doctor say about a little nighttime balm and a bedtime snack? But when she stepped on the scale and her doctor raised an eyebrow, she knew something was different. "You've dropped nearly 12 pounds since your last visit," he said, scrolling through her chart. "And your waist measurement? This can't be right. Are you exercising more?" Janet smiled. "Not really. Just sleeping better." The conversation that followed was one she never expected. Her blood pressure had stabilized. Her blood sugar, once creeping toward the danger zone, was back in a healthy range. Even her resting heart rate had improved. And the only real change? That gentle routine before bed. No new medications. No strict diet. Just calm, consistency, and care. Her doctor leaned back, curious. "What exactly have you been doing?" She told him the truth. About the balm, about the snack, about learning to stop starving her body into submission and instead give it what it actually needed, reassurance. About how her sleep had become deeper, her belly softer, and her thoughts quieter. To her surprise, he didn't dismiss it. He nodded slowly and said something she would never forget. Sometimes, the body just needs permission to heal. That moment validated everything she had been feeling but was afraid to trust. Because when you've been taught that change only comes from struggle, it's hard to believe in gentle solutions. It's hard to believe in rest. But the evidence was there, in her lab results, in her genes, in her smile. And slowly, her doctor started asking more questions, genuinely intrigued. He even asked if she'd be willing to share her story anonymously with some of his older patients who were facing the same frustrations. She agreed, of course, because if her quiet transformation could help even one more person step out of that painful cycle of restriction and shame, it would be worth it. Janet didn't feel like a success story. She felt like someone who had finally learned to cooperate with her body instead of constantly trying to correct it. Her doctor wasn't shocked because she'd lost weight. He was shocked because she had done it in a way that went against everything most health plans prescribe. No gym, no tracking apps, no pills, just a ritual of compassion and a commitment to making her body feel safe again. And what began as a private experiment was now something she felt proud to share. Not as advice, but as permission for anyone else who felt stuck, tired, and unheard, just like she once did. For most of her life, Janet believed weight loss followed a simple rule: eat clean, move more, and the results would come. That rule worked for a while, but once she hit her 60s, something changed. The old tricks stopped working, and worse, they seemed to backfire. She wasn't alone. So many women in her age group had the same complaint. I'm doing everything I used to do, but now my body just ignores me. It felt like betrayal, as if the body they had cared for all these years had decided to stop listening. But it wasn't betrayal. It was biology. An older body isn't broken, it's different. It responds to different cues, speaks a quieter language. After 60, the body prioritizes stability over change. It becomes more protective, more sensitive to stress. It reacts faster to inflammation and it slows down energy use, not because it's lazy, but because it's being careful. That's why intense workouts, crash diets, or strict calorie restrictions can actually make things worse. The body reads those signals as danger, and when it feels unsafe, it holds on tighter, to fat, to water, to everything it might need for protection. But the method Janet discovered didn't threaten her body. It bypassed the alarm system. Instead of pushing harder, she stepped softer. Instead of cutting more, she added back what her body had been missing. A sense of ease, a sense of being supported. The balm she used wasn't just about the ingredients, it was about sending a signal. A physical message that said, "You're not under attack, you can rest, you can release." This is why it worked when nothing else did, because the solution wasn't in overpowering the body, it was in collaborating with it. And that's the shift no one tells you about after 60, that your body needs to feel safe to let go. That stress, emotional, physical, even nutritional, builds walls around fat. And no diet can tear those down until the body trusts again. Janet didn't change who she was. She changed how she treated her body. And the results weren't just physical, they were emotional, psychological. She no longer feared food or felt ashamed of rest. She understood that her belly wasn't being stubborn, it was being cautious. And once that wall of caution was lowered, once her body felt soothed instead of threatened, the changes unfolded naturally, not fast, but real. And they stayed, not because she kept fighting, but because she finally stopped. Janet had spent years covering up her belly. Flowy blouses, dark colors, strategic angles in photos, always trying to draw attention away from that one part of her body she never made peace with. It wasn't just about size. It was about shame. Quiet, constant, exhausting shame. And yet, as the weeks passed, as her nightly ritual became part of her life, not a chore, not a trick, just something she did with care, something began to shift, not just on the outside, but in how she saw herself. Her belly was still there, of course. It hadn't vanished, but it no longer felt like a problem. It felt like a part of her story, a part she could now touch without flinching, without judgment. She remembered standing in front of the mirror one morning, towel around her waist, and placing her hands on her stomach, something she used to avoid. And instead of the old flood of criticism, something new came up, a kind of quiet gratitude for the children this body carried, for the meals it had digested, for the stress it had absorbed without breaking, for simply keeping her alive. She didn't cry, she didn't smile, she just stood there, still, aware, and for the first time, at peace. That's what this journey had brought her, not just weight loss, but weight release. The release of tension, of shame, of the belief that her worth depended on the size of her waistline. She had found softness in a place she had only ever punished, and that changed how she walked through the world. Her clothes fit differently, yes, but so did her relationships. She found herself laughing more with her daughter, sitting longer with her grandson, being more present, not preoccupied by how she looked or what she should be doing to fix herself. And that was the real victory, not the inches lost, but the heaviness she no longer carried. Because when you stop seeing your body as the enemy, everything gets lighter. Janet's belly had once felt like a mark of failure. Now, it was a quiet reminder of resilience. It had held stress. It had held sorrow. And now, it held peace. All of this. From a few moments of care before bed, a balm, a breath, a gentle routine that told her body every night, "You're safe. You're enough. You can let go now." And somehow, that made all the difference. There's a part of every evening that speaks louder than the rest. A moment, maybe just a few minutes, where your body either prepares to heal or tightens in defense. For Janet, that moment used to come after she turned off the lights. She'd lie in bed, silent on the outside, but full of tension inside. Worry, regret, thoughts like, I shouldn't have eaten that. I need to walk more tomorrow. Will this belly ever go away? Without realizing it, she was ending each day by reinforcing the very stress her body was trying to escape. And that one quiet moment, those hidden nighttime patterns, were working against every effort she made during the day. Because what many don't realize is this: the body doesn't reset through willpower, it resets through safety. And safety isn't just physical, it's emotional, hormonal, even spiritual. So when Janet changed her night, everything else began to shift. Now, instead of crawling into bed with guilt, she closes her day with kindness. A few gentle minutes of touch, a warm drink, a moment of quiet presence with her own body. Nothing extravagant, nothing commercial, just small acts of recognition. Her nights became sacred, not because of magic, but because they became hers again. A time to soften, not perform, to support her body, not scold it. And here's the question she now asks others. What is your body going through while you sleep? Is it trying to rest or trying to recover from how you treated it all day? Is your night calming your system or keeping it alert? Are you ending the day with signals of peace or with another layer of stress to store in your belly? Tell me below. Which part of your nighttime routine do you think could be working against you? Is it the food, the thoughts, the lack of routine? Your answer might reveal more than any diet plan ever could. Janet's transformation didn't come from a product. It came from attention, from learning that her body wasn't just reacting to calories, it was reacting to how she lived, how she touched it, how she closed each day. And when she chose to give it calm, softness, and consistency, her body responded with something beautiful: release. Not just of fat, but of fear, of shame, of the idea that aging means fading, because it doesn't. Sometimes aging means finally coming home to yourself and finding that healing lives in the smallest, quietest places of all,